things are better left unknown. And I'll never find you here, 'cause no one's ever What a widow, a peaceful spider. When the glass is clean, she's a sneaky hider. Hide the lies and the alibis. Oh, what a sinner, is it in her? What's the truth in this riddle? Is love really just this simple? I can't seem to find my way in this world that never stays. What a widow, a peaceful spider. When the glass is clean, she's a sneaky hider. Hide the lies and the alibis. What a sinner, is it in her? Is this real? Just illusion? I'm lost in the wonderland of confusion. I'm lost in the wonderland of confusion. Is this real or just illusion? Manifestation or a dark delusion? Is this real or just illusion? I'm lost in a wonderland of confusion.
This is Cynthia Sue Larson with Reality Shifters and the International Mandela Effect Conference, and you're now listening to Dark Wolf's Den Show on Ripon Common Sense Radio.
Hello.
Lasers.
Hello.
This station is now the ultimate power in the universe.
This is your man Meta, aka Propagate This Light, and you're now listening to Dark Wolf's Den.
Are ghosts real?
We had 1,000 hours of continuous communication with the spirit world.
Does time travel actually exist?
The laws of physics seem to be compatible with time machines.
You know, sometimes I wonder about reincarnation. Don't you?
A 4-year-old boy in Adelaide, Australia, has told his parents that he used to be Britain's Princess Diana.
What would happen if the world found out that aliens were real?
I didn't say disclosure would be easy, but what is the alternative?
To establish a space force as the 6th branch
of the armed forces.
We have so many questions and yet so little time, so to have you here, the pleasure is all mine.
Coming to you from a secret mountain cave, hidden deep within the Idaho wilderness. This is the Dark Wolf's Den Show. Now, here is your host, Jerry Hicks.
That's right, I am Jerry Hicks, also known as the Dark Wolf, and welcome back to another episode of the Dark Wolf's Den Show. Whether you're on the edge of reality, the edge of the galaxy, the edge of your seat, or anywhere in between, we're glad you chose us to be right there with you. Ladies and gentlemen, it is Wednesday, September 23rd, 2020, and tonight we're going to talk about a topic that is really kind of loony, if you will. We're going to talk about moon madness. That's right. There's a lot of mysteries and craziness surrounding the moon, and we're going to discuss a couple of them tonight. Not necessarily about the moon landing, but about the moon itself. Like, is it made of cheese? Okay, maybe not that. Maybe we'll go a little deeper than that. But anyway, it is Moon Madness tonight, September 23rd, 2020 on the Dark Wolf's Den Show, exclusively on Ripon Common Sense Radio. But first, today in history. On this day in 1962, ABC aired its first color TV series, which happened to be the pilot episode of a brand new show by Hanna-Barbera, a show that later would go on to definitely inspire me, and I'm sure most everyone in my generation. Ladies and gentlemen, the Jetsons. That's right, the Jetsons aired for the first time in color on this day on ABC in 1962. And that was this week's Today in History. And once again, our Today in History kind of lines up with our topic tonight, which is, of course, Moon Madness. And you remember the Futurist episode, a lot of them thought we would be living in space and on the moon and different places like that by now, which of course we're not, actually, but that's, something we may touch on later. But right now, we're just going to go ahead and get started real simple with a couple questions. Like, science doesn't really know how the moon was formed. I mean, honestly, there's a lot of theories, and a lot of theories taught as fact, which is something else that happens a lot. And this is something that I want to go ahead and get out of the way right at the beginning of the show. This is kind of a rant that's been building up inside of me for a while, so I really, really need to get this out, guys. It really bothers me when things are taught that are theory and taught as fact. Like the Big Bang Theory taught as fact. This is what happened. It happened this way. No, that is a theory. As well as how the moon formed. You see, science says that it formed when something hit the Earth years and years ago, right when the Earth was forming. Right in the very, very beginning, there was this something called Theia, this small planetoid object that supposedly hit the Earth at just the right angle to create the Earth and the moon. Well, that doesn't really fit really well because there's a lot of anomalies about really originate together. So it's really hard to explain why a word that means the peoples or actions that came before the moon even exists if the moon had been there the entire time.
In ancient writings and traditions, one can find proof of a time when the moon did not exist. Democritus and Anaxagoras mention that there was a time when no moon could be seen in the night skies.
And for argument's sake, fine, an eclipse does explain it for a short period because it doesn't state how long that it wasn't seen in the night skies.
In describing the history of the Greek regions of Arcadia, Aristotle writes that the Pelasgians, since very old times, at a time when the moon did not exist.
And now here is an entire group or race of people that existed before the moon did.
Apollonius from Rhodes mentions something similar. He talks about a time when not all of the celestial objects existed in the sky, before the time of Decameron's and Pyrrhus' generation, before the cataclysm, when the moon did not exist and the only humans that existed were the Pelasgians.
Which does make you wonder, did the moon cause the great flood around the world? Because we know from archaeology proof that and geological proof that there is a proof of great flood around the entire world. It's in the rock layers. It shows that there was an actual flood that happened. But science cannot exactly explain why or how that did occur, what triggered the flood. And of course, they may never have the explanation, but I conject that it is possibly the moon coming into the orbit of the Earth that really made the tides and water go cuckoo and flood the land area.
Living on the mountains of Arcadia, region in Greece, these inhabitants of Arcadia were also known as the Proselenists, meaning those that were before the moon in Greek. Proselenists.
And yet another culture that is named by the fact that they existed before the moon did.
In Plutarch's work, Moros, we find the following. There were Arcadians of Evander's following, the so-called pre-lunar people. Similarly, Ovid wrote, the Arcadians are said to have possessed their land before the birth of Zeus, and the folk is older than the moon. Stephanus of Byzantium wrote, Arcadians and females both exist before the moon. Hippolytus refers to the legend that Arcadia brought forth Pelagius of greater antiquity than the moon.
And once again, a historical description of greater antiquity than the moon itself.
Lucianus, in his astrology, says that the Arcadians affirm in their folly that they are older than the moon.
However, the Greeks aren't the only ones to talk about a time before the moon.
Evidence has also been found in other parts of the world. In Bolivia, symbols on the walls of the courtyard of Kalasaya, built in 1300 BC, provide evidence that the moon came into orbit around the Earth at a specific moment in time thousands of years ago, long before what mainstream historians refer to as recorded history.
And let's remember, recorded history is a lot different than actual history, because it's just that, what's been recorded. But there was a lot of time before that where history was not really recorded, minus, say, cave paintings or things of that nature.
Moreover, the calendar gate in the same site provides evidence that a smaller satellite once rotated around the Earth. The oral traditions of Colombian Indians of the Bogota Highlands in the eastern Cordilleras of Colombia refer to a time before the moon.
Now, here is a native culture also speaking once again about a time before the moon was in the sky.
In the earliest times, when the moon was not yet in the heavens, says the tribesman of Chibchas.
So far, we have heard context from two different continents on two different sides of the entire world. And it really, really makes you wonder when they start, once again, as we've talked about in all the case files on this show, when you start seeing the same evidences showing up in the ancient text or in any case files, then you start to wonder if this is actually true, because if it shows up over and over and over, you kind of want to call it solid evidence at that point, no matter how anecdotal it may be. And here we have anecdotal from all kind of cultures on all kind of continents across the entire world, speaking of a time before the moon was in the sky. And yet another continent we're going to hear from right now is Africa.
Africa also provides its own evidence. According to Zulu legend, the moon was brought hundreds of generations ago by two brothers of alien form, Wowane and Mpanku.
So I would safely say, based on the evidence that we have heard so far, that there was a time on the earth before the moon was in the sky, and this was recorded by the ancient texts. So regardless of what kind of theories science may put forward and teach as fact, it is not fact at all. if it does not include the idea of the moon not being there while humans were on this earth. Because, like we know, the big impactor theory, as I said earlier, is exactly how the scientists think it happened, when the earth was still in a molten form and there was no human life upon it. And I just can't buy that. There's too many oddities. So let's assume that the ancients know more than the scientists that are, dogmatic as can be, and yet again teaching fact, or teaching theory as fact instead of fact as fact. Let's always kind of watch when that happens, guys. Always keep our eyes out. That is dogmatism at its absolute worst. But back to our topic tonight, guys, moon madness. We already know now that the moon was not in the sky for all of Earth's history. We know this from the ancient texts and the ancient writings that have been presented thus far this evening. So what is the moon? There is a lot of theory around what the moon could be. Could it be a alien spaceship? Could it be made of cheese? I'd like to really think it's made of cheese. Then again, I may be a little bit hungry right now. But anyway, that beside the point. What is the moon? How did it get into our orbit? And why does it stay as it does? It has an immense and tremendous effect on the tides of the Earth. And our Earth would be in a lot of trouble if we didn't have the moon now, only because we've gotten used to the way that it is now. And modern life would be changed absolutely forever if the moon wasn't there. And speaking of modern life, one thing that's kind of lost in modern life is looking at the moon and, having time to look up. Because I remember the man in the moon, right? You guys remember the man in the moon? Well, personally, I don't really see the man in the moon that well anymore. However, there are a lot of ancient legends, and more current legends even, that don't speak of a man in the moon, but yet a rabbit in the moon. That's right. A lot of people look at the craters on the moon, and instead of seeing a man's face looking at them, they see a rabbit.
It is likely that sometimes you've stopped to look at the clouds and you've distinguished many different forms among them. A face, an animal, or many different objects. Now, have you also tried observing the full moon at night? This celestial body has captivated human beings since the dawn of time, and many people have distinguished different shapes on its surface. A smiling face, a man carrying wood, and even the shape of a rabbit.
I've personally never seen the man carrying the wood. I have seen the shape of the face, but I don't think I've ever seen the man carrying wood across the moon, and I definitely have not seen this rabbit is talking about.
In particular, this last one has spawned different legends which explain its presence on the surface of the moon.
And once again, ancient legends about the moon.
In Aztec mythology, it is said that one day the great god Quetzalcoatl decided to come down to Earth and take a walk around it, disguised in his human form. He walked the entire day, and when the evening came, he started to feel hungry and tired. But even then, he didn't stop walking. The night finally came. The moon and the stars appeared in the sky, and in that moment, the great god decided to finally stop. Exhausted, he finally sat down. And he then noticed that a rabbit, who had come out to find her dinner, had gotten near him. Quetzalcoatl asked the rabbit what she was eating, and the animal showed him the grass she had collected. The rabbit humbly offered him some, but the great god responded that he couldn't eat that and that his destiny probably was to starve to death. Horrified, the rabbit approached who she saw as a mere human and told him that she was just a small creature, but that he could use her as food for nourishment so he could survive. Quetzalcoatl's heart was deeply touched by the rabbit's willingness to sacrifice herself. He petted the rabbit with love, and taking her in his hands, he told her that no matter how little she was, from that day onwards, everyone would remember her incredibly selfless gesture, offering her life to save another. Quetzalcoatl raised her high, very high. In fact, so high that the shape of the rabbit was stamped on the surface of the moon. Then the god carefully brought the rabbit back down and showed her her stamped portrait on the moon, which would remain forever there so that every human in history would see it.
Although being a great moral story, I yet am to remember a rabbit in the moon growing up. I remember a man in the moon, but I don't remember a rabbit in the moon. That is just so odd to me. And as a matter of fact, I hadn't even heard of it until after the Mandela effect, and I found out that that was actually an Asian belief. I did not know that there was this Quetzalcoatl and Aztec connection to it. As a matter of fact, I did know about a couple of these connections. We're about to hear about the rabbit in the moon. The only one I did know was the Asian one, which we will get to shortly.
A bit farther north, in a region between Canada and the United States, there is a popular tale about a young rabbit who wished to ride the moon. However, the only animal willing to help him do it was the crane. In the effort to throw the rabbit towards the moon, he stretched his legs so much that they ended up as elongated as they look today. The rabbit was able to reach the celestial body, fulfilling his dreams. Thus, whenever there is a full moon, you can see the rabbit riding the moon.
And this myth attempts to explain both why the crane's legs are so long as well as why apparently a rabbit can be seen riding the moon. And once again, I have never seen this rabbit. Every night I go out and, especially the full moon nights, I look and I can't see this rabbit. I've tried so hard so many times and I just don't see it. I don't know. What do you guys see the rabbit in the moon and the full moon? I can't. I'm sorry, I can't.
On the other side of the planet, the Chinese would see the shape of a rabbit grinding something with a mortar and pestle.
And this is the one that I heard about after the Mandela effect. And again, I thought it was just a local Asian, local Chinese belief. I did not know that it was spread across continents, across the world, that this rabbit was being seen. I had never even heard of it, like I said, until after the Mandela effect. And I found this Chinese legend, which, fine, every culture has their own difference, their own stories and things like that. I thought we had the man in the moon, but apparently the man in the moon is quite rare, and it's more usual to see this rabbit.
They say that the rabbit is preparing the elixir of life for the goddess of the moon, the immortal Changi.
Which is also why they named their moon lander Chang'e, after the moon goddess, supposedly.
Meanwhile, in Japan, we find a legend similar to the Aztec myth, named Tsukino Usagi. The legend says that in a village once appeared an old man who was enduring a lot of hardship and hunger. He asked 3 animals for help: a monkey, a fox, and a rabbit. The monkey went up a tree and brought him some fruits. The fox went hunting and came back with a bird. However, no matter how hard he tried, the rabbit couldn't find any food for the old man. Seeing the suffering the man was experiencing, the rabbit felt a deep sense of shame and guilt. Then, the rabbit decided to light a bonfire and threw himself into it as a sacrifice so that the old man could have something to eat. When the old man witnessed that, he revealed his true identity, a powerful god. Deeply moved by the heroic gesture of the rabbit, he immortalized its memory by imprinting his silhouette on the surface of the moon. This legend is actually present in many Asian cultures, such as India's, Thailand's, or Sri Lanka's. This legend also inspired the creation of different festivals celebrated in the middle of autumn, such as Tsukimi in Japan and Chuseok in Korea. The legend was passed on from generation to generation, and it is shared with children to explain to them why rabbits jump so high. Because they are trying to reach their hero imprinted on the moon.
Or perhaps to explain why apparently everybody sees a rabbit riding the moon or in the moon, because I don't see it. I don't know. I don't see it. I've tried. I can't even see the man in the moon anymore. Maybe I just need to get my eyes checked, right? Maybe it's just a case of lunacy. That's right, lunacy. Does anybody know where that word comes from? Just like the word lunatic, it actually comes from the moon. That's right. Lunacy is the idea that the moon affects the human brain. And there's been a lot of debate over the years whether or not the full moon actually has an effect on humans.
Almost everybody loves the full moon. It is romantic it can be a little spooky. And some swear people get kooky.
And I can tell you, after working with the public for almost 20 years, I can definitely say people get a little more weird on a full moon. At least that's been my experience.
The influence of the moon and behavior has been called the lunar effect. The belief that the full moon causes strange behavior was widespread throughout Europe in the Middle Ages. Even the word lunacy, meaning insanity, comes from the Latin word for moon.
It's pretty interesting to me that it was such a common thing that they had a word for it, which we use to mean crazy today. And of course, that word is lunacy or lunatic.
In ancient Greece, philosophers thought that the water in the brain might act like the tides of the ocean, creating a wave of strange behavior when the moon was full.
Which makes a lot of sense to me. If the moon affects the tides of the earth, and the earth is 70% water, and so is the human body, and I would more than dare say that the tides of the body would also be affected, especially when it comes to the brain. Because if the tides in the balance of the body is off, then the balance of the brain is going to be off, and there's going to be these oddities that occur, these lunatic moments.
Some studies have shown higher rates of crime and emergency room admissions, but they've never been able to show these things in full moon after full moon or month after month. So in the end, there really is no scientific study that shows the full moon affects human behavior.
My mother, as well as a variety of people that I have known in my life, have worked in nursing homes for a majority of their career. And they will tell you, hands down, without question, that the full moon affects people's behavior. My mother hated to go to work on a full moon. She said people just acted so much more strangely. And they would pull fire alarms. She said every time a full moon went off, there was a fire alarm that went off in their nursing home. And again, this is not the first person to give me this account. As a matter of fact, I've heard this account from a number of people who have worked in nursing homes. And the GM of my current job was also actually, not the radio, the other job that I do, my regular job. This person was actually also a CNA in nursing homes for many years before they became a hotelier. And let me tell you, this person here will swear by the fact that the full moon makes people crazy. And once again, working with the public for almost 20 years, I can definitely tell you the full moon affects people's behaviors 100%, hands down, without question.
If you still don't believe me, you're not alone. Many emergency room workers and police officers swear the full moon brings on crazy behavior. If you're a believer, be careful. There's a full moon every 29.5 days.
So do the lunatics come out during the full moon, or does the full moon create the lunatics that come out, right? I don't know, guys. I know, like I said, from personal experience and from knowing people who have worked in these fields, I can tell you hands down, the full moon does affect people. It might not be on a consistent basis or might not be the same way every month, but I am downright here to tell you, without a doubt in my mind, that the full moon definitely has an effect on humans. And as you guys know, that music means we've got to go ahead and take a network break right here. So we will be back with the second half of the Dark Wolf's Den Show right after these messages. Don't you touch that dial. That's right.
We gotta stoke the fires and run off the men in black. Don't touch that dial. We'll be right back.
Sex in the city? Nope. Interview with a vampire? Nope. If you build it, they will come? Febreze? Tweeze in the middle? Wrong again. Depends. Nope. Welcome to the Twilight Zone, my friends. A phenomenon known as the Mandela Effect. You may have heard of it. You may want to not neglect unbecoming, awake, and spiritually inclined. So sit back, relax, while I blow your mind. Take the thumb off the cell, stop following the sheep. Down the rabbit hole we go. Are you ready for that leap? The Zapruder film, #JFK. I looked at the footage and I said, what the hey? How come there are 6 people in that dang car? Stretch limo, for me, this was all too bizarre. A glass behind the driver, no way, Jose. I remember before the car, my mind was in total disarray. Trying to make sense of what I was seeing, what I was witnessing. Didn't connect with my inner being. A second woman in the car for me was only the first lady. Do you smell what the rock is cooking? All this seemed kinda shady. Berenstein Bears. Nope. Shazam? Sinbad? Not in this reality. Good lord. An awakening. Was it all a revelation? The naysayers and skeptics call it confabulation. They say we misremembered and call it bad. Crazy. Did you smoke a doob? Maybe that's why it's a little bit hazy. Unless you experience it, you'll never know. But enough of that. On with this Mandela effect flow. Mandela effect in the house. What in the world happened to Ed McMahon? In this reality, Publishers Clearinghouse was not a fan. Never the spokesperson, but we remember it clear as day. McMahon holding that check while the winner yelled out, yay! American Family Publishers, never heard of them until now. This Mandela effect has me raising the people's eyebrow. So many theories on what it could be. Have you ever heard of CERN and the LHC? Luke, I am your father. Nope. Sally Fields? Nope, wrong again. That stands for the Large Hadron Collider. I thought I would mention. You know, the machine that opens up portals into different dimensions? You're probably thinking that this is all science. That's just the way it is. You know? Stay strong, my friends. That's just the way it is. Dolly has no braces? Are you serious? Good lord. Joel Osteen. Oh wait, Joel Osteen. So what the heck happened to the owl? Oh, this is definitely.
Oh yeah, Juanito 1975 and the greatest Mandela rap ever. I can't wait to see the music video for that. Hi everyone, it's AJ the Ripon Rabbit. Are you enjoying Jerry Hicks in the Dark Wolf's Den? Moon Madness tonight? I know I am. Please make sure to thumb up that video, hit that subscribe button, and ring that bell if you're enjoying tonight's program. I'll be back again Friday night. Jerry's going to do a double header this week. Let me tell you, Nikki Rabbit and I have been from Southern California to Northern California and back. And we're not finished with our road trip just yet. We'll be back in Vegas late tomorrow night. So top hats off to Jerry for pulling another double header. Tune in tomorrow night, Thursday, starting at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, as part 2 of Moon Madness continues with Mars Madness. It's going to be a great way to cap 2 bookend subjects together. I can't wait. And I will return Friday night with a special episode that I'm going to call it Unmasked, because I got to tell you, I'm going to tell you all about this road trip from Southern California to Northern California and back. We're going to talk about the necessary discussion of masks. When is it time to start taking these things off, folks? We're going to look at all the scientific data available. We're going to perhaps even open up lines on discussion of this subject, because I gotta tell you, it's a mess out there. We have been up and down the coast, and we have seen, and we have lots of things to report. So join me Friday night for that episode of Unmasked. Then Saturday night, we're going to talk about procrastination. I can tell you this much. I procrastinate. I'm a huge procrastinator. What does that mean? Why do we do it? We're going to find out Saturday night, starting at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central. Then we're going to end out the weekend together with a look at string theory. It's going to be a great way to end the weekend. And like I said, I can't wait just to be home. I'm actually coming to you live right now from Thousand Oaks, California. I have a raspy voice because I've been around that good, clean ocean air. And I can't wait to give you the update from the road. All the details are going to be coming in the Unmasked show this Friday night, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central. Information you need to hear. We're going to return back to Dark Wolf's Den, Jerry Hicks, Moon Madness, right here on the very best of Common Sense Radio, the Ripon Rabbit Hole. Stick around. Part 2 is coming up.
If you were meant to be controlled, you would have come with a remote, but you didn't. And that's why you listen to the Dark Wolf's Den Show. Now, here is your host, Jerry Hicks.
You may be right, I may be crazy, but it just might be a lunatic you're looking for. Welcome back, everybody. I am the lunatic known as Jerry Hicks, also known as the Dark Wolf. And this is the second half of the Dark Wolf's Den Show. Guys, whether you're on the edge of reality, the edge of the galaxy, the edge of your seat, or anywhere in between, we're glad you chose us to be right there with you. If you're just joining us tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about moon madness and all the insanity surrounding the moon itself. In the first part, we talked about the rabbit in the moon and the different fun side of the moon. Now we're going to get into a lot of the deeper actual mysteries surrounding the moon. Not just the effects that it has on humans, but what about the moon itself? There's a lot of oddity, like the fact that it shouldn't be in our sky to begin with. It is a quarter of the size of the Earth. When it comes to moon-planet relationships, that is extremely odd, which means it most likely did not form from the Earth. It also means that it most likely didn't just get captured because of the gravity of the Earth, because it's way too big and it would not have captured an object that size. And there has been evidence presented that suggests that perhaps the moon itself isn't as solid as we think. Perhaps the moon is actually hollow.
The Earth's moon has been with us since time immemorial, providing safe and comforting nightlight, our tidal and seasonal cycles, and inspiration for human creativity, from cult religions to poems, songs, and sci-fi thrillers. From 50 years ago, it became an awe-inspiring base for exciting scientific discovery and exploration. But there are some in the scientific community who believe that their peers are in denial about the origins of our moon, that the moon is a hollowed out, artificially modified spacecraft created eons ago by a higher intelligence and towed into its earthly orbit, perhaps for the purpose of monitoring our species. The theory sounds laughably far-fetched, but astonishingly, there is not a single piece of scientific evidence that disproves it.
And yes, it does sound a little extreme, that the moon itself could be nothing more than, say, a spacecraft or a hollowed out shell of something that may have been a spacecraft. And yeah, like he said, there's no scientific evidence to actually dispute this fact. As a matter of fact, most of the evidence tends to suggest it to be true.
Here are 6 scientific findings that support it. Number 6. The moon is much older than the Earth. Ancient writings in Tiwanaku, Bolivia, date the first appearance of the moon as 11 to 13,000 years ago.
Which was well after the Earth itself had been formed.
Its cosmic arrival is said to have coincided with mass extinctions of animal species in Earth's northern hemisphere. One theory about the moon's inception is that it was a chunk of the Earth that broke away, leaving a massive gouge where the Pacific Ocean now is.
And I will admit, the fact that the ocean, the Pacific Ocean, is such a big ocean and does literally cover half of the Earth if you look on a globe, then it does make you wonder perhaps that was caused by a meteor impact of some type. But it doesn't necessarily have to be what caused the moon.
However, this does not fit in with the fact that the moon has an entirely different chemical composition from our planet.
And this is another one of those little things that science doesn't like to talk about. And you know, guys, we love to ask the questions that science doesn't like to ask. But they don't like to admit the fact that the chemical and isotope makeup of what has been found and brought back from the moon doesn't match the chemical and isotope makeup of the Earth. If it was made up of parts of the Earth from an explosion years ago, even if it was two planetoid systems that had collided, even if that was the case, if it experienced that in the past, then it should have the same chemical makeup as the Earth does. It should be darn near to identical with small variations because of the other planetoid object. However, that is not what we see. We see an entirely, completely different chemical composition and isotope composition on the moon opposed to the Earth.
And is also now known to be much older than Earth, and possibly even our solar system. It is thought that the moon is at least 4.5 billion years old, according to the dating of space rocks, and that the Earth and moon originated very far away from each other. Planet Earth seems to have scored all the iron, gold and other mineral deposits, while the moon has very little.
And again, to the point, if something smashed into the Earth and then everything split off randomly, then there should be a good amount of deposits of these minerals both on the moon and the Earth, yet once again, as we just heard, that is not what we find.
There are other reasons why the moon cannot be seen as a natural satellite of Earth. Astrophysicists are still unable to explain how it eventuated.
And like we mentioned in the first half, the big impactor theory that we were just now discussing is how the scientists say that the moon was formed, but there is not any evidence to suggest this. And let's really keep in mind, once again, like we spoke about in the first half, that they do have a habit of teaching theory as fact, and that is just really detrimental because that doesn't necessarily get us anywhere. As a matter of fact, that probably sets us back because people stop looking for real answers because they assume the answer has already been found, because the dogmatic scientists refused to give any other answers. But if you look into the evidence, you're going to find that the dogmatic scientists are actually very, very wrong this time. As if there's any other time that they're right. But anyway, moving along, the dogmatic scientists are the ones that are teaching these theories as fact, and I just think that's really, really dangerous. So really be careful, guys, when you hear some kind of theory, and just listen carefully, make sure they don't start teaching it like fact, even though it is clearly theory, like the Big Bang Theory, like the moon big impactor theory. Like a lot of theories that are taught as true gospel. And again, you guys, just really be careful when you listen to these scientific explanations, what they're saying is real and what they're trying to say is real that actually is just idea or theory and non-proven. Because it's the proven stuff we need to pay attention to.
With scientist Isaac Asimov having said that Earth's weak gravitational field would technically preclude it from having a huge satellite like the moon, which is a quarter of the size of the Earth.
And once again, it just reiterates my earlier point that the gravity of the Earth just isn't enough to just snatch the moon out of space as it's passing by. It just isn't strong enough. It's a quarter size of the Earth. If it was smaller, yeah, no problem. But that size, that is not the explainable kind of thing. Yet we know that it didn't form with the Earth like we learned in the first half, because there was a time when people spoke about before the moon was in the sky.
He called the moon, with no atmosphere or magnetic field, a freak of nature. Likewise rebutted is the capture theory that the Earth somehow pulled the planetoid, or fragments forming it, into its circular orbit, which defies gravitational physics. The water anomaly. No water has ever been found on the moon, with moon rocks collected containing no water particles or molecules bound into their mineral content. What astronauts did find were rocks containing rusted iron, indicating a process requiring oxygen, free hydrogen, water and iron, and that water must exist somewhere on or within the moon. NASA have blamed the release of astronauts' urine for the rusting phenomenon. However, it would have dissipated into the atmosphere, and there would have to have been a time lag for the process to have occurred.
And just less than a month ago, NASA released another report about the moon, admitting once again that it is rusting, or has a rust color to it on the soil, and they say it's evidence of hematite on the moon, which once again is needed water for this to form. So it's really intriguing that this water does show up from time to time on the moon for some reason.
Apollo astronauts left monitoring instruments which registered a wind of water across the moon's surface on March 7, 1971, with the water vapor clouds lasting 14 hours and covering 100 square miles.
Perhaps the moon itself is a great big manufacturing plant, and the water vapor is just a steam from some of the manufacturing going on. Of course, this is extreme speculation.
NASA explained away the phenomenon by suggesting that the two water tanks left there had become worn and ruptured. However, Rice University's physicists Dr. John Freeman Jr. and H. Ken Hills posited that the chances of this happening to both 180 kilometers apart at the same time were close to zero.
And you gotta love when a scientist finally stands up and calls shenanigans on something. I think that's absolutely hilarious right there.
And that the tanks facing in opposite directions would not have produced vapors so widespread and pervasive. Freeman and Hills believed the massive release of water vapors had been emitted from deep inside the moon's interior during a moonquake. This suggested the presence of hollowed-out areas filled with gases to sustain life forms.
And I can tell you, if that sounds insane to you, I know without a doubt, as 100% fact, as we sit right here, right now, I can guarantee you I know without a doubt that there is life on the moon. That's right, I can say that with 100% confidence, that I know without question that there is life on our moon. How do I know this? Why do I suddenly know this? Well, it's really actually easy to find. If you look at the Israel space mission that happened, I believe earlier this year, if not last year, the end of last year, 2020's been kind of wild, so I've kind of lost track of when this occurred. But anyway, very recently, Israel sent a mission to the dark side of the moon, and they made it to the moon. The problem is the landing didn't go all that well, and it crashed. Now, one of the experiments that was on this lander had tardigrades in it. Tardigrades are microscopic animals, also called water bears, that can survive even the vacuum of space itself. So surviving on the moon for them is a piece of cake. That would be no problem at all. And there are a colony of tardigrades that live on our moon. Now, yes, it is microscopic life. It is an intelligent life, though. Sometimes I wonder if there's much of that on Earth anyway. But on the moon, there's not intelligent life. We don't have, moon people that we're going to be interacting with. But I can 100% without a doubt guaranteed say that there does exist some form of life on our moon. Albeit life that we put there, but it's there just the same.
Number 4. Processed minerals. Moon rocks have been found to be magnetized, although the moon does not have a magnetic field.
Now, can somebody explain that to me, please? How does a rock become magnetized when it's not within a magnetic field? Please, I'd love to know the answer to this. Now, that said, without the atmosphere that we have on Earth being around the moon, then perhaps solar winds could ionize the rocks, but still magnetizing something that doesn't have a magnetic field is kind of a strange effect, I think, even for solar winds. So, I'm not exactly a scientist, don't get me wrong. I'm not an expert on solar winds, and that could be what's going on. However, I just find it really odd that these rocks would have a strong magnetic field on the moon when there's not really much a magnetic field that they're exposed to aside from Earth's, and I dare argue that they're not really that much exposed to Earth's either.
The moon has 3 rock layers, of which the outer crust carries the heavier and harder material, contrary to logic.
So the moon is literally inside out from what it should be as we know planetary physics. So that is very, very intriguing. And speaking of missions to the dark side of the moon, China also put a mission up to the dark side of the moon. The Chang'e missions, as we heard the Chang'e earlier in the first half with the story of the rabbit, and Chang'e is the goddess that lives on the moon, right? So China went with the Chang'e lander to the dark side of the moon, and they did not fail the landing. They actually completed their landing, but they found something kind of strange.
You're sipping on a cup of steaming coffee in mission control of the China National Space Administration. The room is covered from wall to wall with glowing screens and monitors. You lean back in your chair and gaze through the wisps of haze rising from your mug. All is quiet as you're about to shut down the U-22 rover for its daily recharge. Suddenly, a scientist bursts through the doors, his hair disheveled. His eyes are as large as full moons. "You won't believe this," he pants. "We found something." You stand up and rush over to the scientist. You eagerly urge him to go on, but he has to catch his breath. The scientist finally stands up and sputters, We found something strange on the dark side of the moon." You take a step back and ask him to repeat himself. The scientist said, "I was going through the videos from U-22 and it picked up something strange, something that we can't explain." A million thoughts race through your head. What could the mysterious object be? You need more information, but you can't help the feeling of butterflies in your stomach as you think, could we have found life? Aliens? A crashed UFO? What is it, you ask as you shake the scientist?
My heart would be racing at this point. I would love to know what was found. What was it? What was it? Tell us, scientists, what? What was found? What did they find? What happened?
We just don't know.
What do you mean you don't know? You're a scientist. That's what you're supposed to do is know, right? Come on, give me an answer.
It looks to be a gel-like substance.
A what? A gel-like substance. What is a gel-like substance doing on the moon? Who dropped a jelly sandwich up there?
It's in one of the craters the rover was exploring. There shouldn't be any gel on the moon. There's no atmosphere and it's freezing cold, he responds. A gel-like substance, you think? How could there possibly be a gel-like substance on the moon? You run over to the red telephone on your desk and pick it up. There are no buttons to push. Once the phone is removed from the cradle, it automatically dials the head of the China National Space Administration.
And yes, this really did happen. They really did find a gel-like substance on the dark side of the moon.
The line picks up and you speak into the receiver. "Sir, we found something. I think you should bring everyone in. This could be big." As you wait for your boss and the rest of the team to come in, you think back to December 7th, 2018, when the China National Space Administration launched Chang'e 4. The main goal of the mission was to land on the dark side of the moon and collect data. On January 3rd, 2019, China became the first country to successfully land a spacecraft on the far side of the moon. You smile as you recall that this was no small feat. Several other countries had tried and failed to do what your team accomplished.
As we spoke about Israel crash landing on the dark side just a little bit ago and accidentally releasing the tardigrade experiment, which now literally means we have life on the moon.
Landing on the dark side of the moon is difficult because of the inability to maintain constant communication with the spacecraft. The monstrous sphere that is the moon blocks the signals between Earth and any vessel on the other side. To get around the problem, you and your team placed a satellite between the moon and the Earth.
And this right here is something that I think is absolutely brilliant. It's the same idea as a repeater, like a radio repeater tower. You have a signal going in, it is boosted and then sent back out elsewhere to where it's supposed to go. In this case, they use like the mirror trick where you bounce light off a mirror and, run it at different angles into different mirrors, things like that. If you've ever played that game on the computer, that's actually really fun. But that's aside, the way they did this was really neat, and I think that this should be implemented throughout the entire solar system. If we put repeaters ever so often, we could send crafts further and further out into space and be able to communicate with them in almost instantaneous time, because the repeaters would be sending the signal back directly, like a very small time lag between what I say and what goes out to the radio. Because of the repeater towers, there's only a small break in the information, or the time, if you will. So it doesn't take long for the repeated signal to get back out to the rest of the people who are listening to it. So if we had repeater satellites all through the solar system, or even around different planets, we could send the signal back through these repeaters back to Earth just as strong as it is when the signal is originally created by the spacecraft, no matter how far out that it is. And I think this is something that would be probably really cheap to implement, in my opinion, because as we know, satellites don't cost very much at all to make. If they did, you wouldn't have Elon Musk putting up thousands at a time. But again, I'm getting off on a rant, and I don't want to get too far off of the topic. But yes, China has found a gel-like substance on the dark side of the moon, and nobody can explain why it's there or what it is. Once again, there are many theories, but they are just that. So again, let's be careful not to teach theory as fact. And we've got one more presenter this evening before we close out the show. We're going to run a little over the regular time. Ladies and gentlemen, maybe you've heard of this next guy. He's really well known in a lot of conspiracy circles. I present to you, ladies and gentlemen, David Icke.
I'd found this book, Who Built the Moon, by two researchers who've written other books. One of them an investigation into Freemasonry. And this book details the extraordinary anomalies relating to the moon. And they came to the conclusion, and I absolutely bloody agree with them, and a bit more than that too, as I'll come to later, that this is what we're looking at. The geometrical connections and everything, and the mathematics and the relationship between them in terms of size and position is just mind-blowing. And what I'm suggesting, and I'm not alone over the years at this level of it, though I think I might be alone at the next bit, that I'll come to in a second, or a few minutes. I've been there before, I don't mind. Is that the moon is actually a hollowed-out planetoid by a very, very advanced race, and it was brought here to take the Earth over.
Now, I have quite a few times heard the idea of the spaceship moon, and that it was brought here for one reason or another, and that it does stabilize Earth for some odd reason, as far as the time of spin and all kind of different elements of the Earth, the tides, and as we know, the full moon has an effect on humans. So we know that the moon has some sort of effect on us just by the fact that it's there, and its gravity as it is compared to the Earth's. So we know that that is a thing, but the idea that it was brought here by an alien race to do something other than monitor us, now this is a newer idea to me.
And what they do, this seems to be a modus operandi. They bring these moons in, and as they bring them in, they fundamentally affect the Earth. I mean, the Earth is at the spin it is and is at the angle it is because of the moon.
And if the moon wasn't in the sky, believe it or not, our world would be thrown into absolute chaos. It would spin every 6 hours instead of 24. The angle would change. Humans may not survive the cataclysms that exists before everything restabilizes if the moon were to disappear. It's actually amazing the things that would happen without the moon being on, being around at the time. So it's really, really intriguing.
A lot, massively so anyway, because of the moon. So when they come in, bingo, things change, and the society that was there before ain't there anymore.
And in the first half, we spoke about the idea of the Great Flood being something that was caused by perhaps the moon being put into place. Because there is, let's remember once again, much evidence that we went over in the first half, that there was a time before the moon was in the sky. There were people on the earth during this time. So when the moon came in, most likely it's what caused the Great Global Flood.
And then gradually they take them over in ways that I'll come to. So when the moon came in, and again, it's so important to come back from the holographic world to the base construct. We see a solid moon, yes, in the play-out world. But back here, it is an energetic construct in the metaphysical universe. And as it came in, and other things that happened, which I talk about in the book, it created this distortion in the information construct of the waveform information base of this universe. And as it did so, it was played out here in all this catastrophe and stuff that I talked about and the ancients talk about. It was played out as this great geological catastrophe and the great flood and all the rest of it. And what is a common theme that they talk about, the ancients, in relation to this? The earth turned over. And you think, how the f*** can the earth turn over? Well, what happened? What happened when the moon came in, the earth turned over? It's at an angle that it is today because of the moon.
See, when I first heard that, I think the mantle and crust switching places, literally turning and churning on the earth. But it literally turned on its side into a different angle.
And so the distortion brought an end to the world that was there before, and we basically went back to rubbing sticks together because of what happened. And that distortion was played out in the human mind, the human perception, the human psyche, and we completely changed our perception of the world and who we are, where we are. So in Who Built the Moon, like I say, I do recommend it, the way it looks at the anomalies and everything, and the connections between these three bodies. And these mathematical, geometrical connections only apply to these three bodies in the solar system. They don't play out against the other planets, just these three. And the moon is so perfectly positioned that because of where it is, when we have an eclipse, it is the same size as the sun. That's why we have the eclipse. And the authors of Who Built the Moon say this: the moon is bigger than it should be, apparently older than it should be, and much lighter in mass than it should be. It occupies an unlikely orbit and is so extraordinary that all existing explanations for its presence are fraught with difficulties, and none of them could be considered remotely watertight.
And this is coming from what sounds like some real scientists instead of dogmatic scientists that swear up and down that no, the moon was created in the early days by something hitting the earth. So yeah, I'm not with that myself, and once again, we need to watch theory taught as fact.
When you go on and you say, where'd the moon come from, you get this story. And like so much in what we call science, that people take it as fact, it's actually a theory which repeated becomes fact. But then you go back and you find that it's a theory.
And as a researcher, things like that are just so very important to look at. Dig down into where it comes from, where the information existed to begin with, and find out if it was just a theory, or if it was a proven fact, or if anything has been proven at all yet. Because, like, the string theory is a great quantum physics theory, but it cannot be proven. Even though it's being more and more accepted as fact among physicists, and I'm not opposed or pro either way on this theory. However, just the fact that it's being accepted as fact when it's never been proven at all, and it's merely theory, like David said, we must be careful and we must do our research and find out what's true and what's not.
And the first one is the moon was created by what's known as the whack theory, or the big whack theory. And that is that a Mars-type planet came in, smacked the Earth, great chunk came off, and became the moon.
Which I'm sure, as I've repeated many times this episode already, I in no way whatsoever believe is what happened.
When the physics of that didn't work out, they came up with the double whack theory, where the Mars-type planet hit the Earth, bit comes off or whatever, and then the Mars-type planet thinks, well, I'll give him one with the right, I'll give you one with the left, comes back and whacks it again, the old 1-2.
Which, according to gravitational physics, is yet again a 1 in a million chance, according to their scenario, that would make this happen.
Talk about bloody desperate. And the truth is, and honest scientists will tell you, they have no bloody clue where the moon come from, and it shouldn't, by physics, be there. This guy, Isaac Asimov, a Russian professor of biochemistry, did a lot of writing on this sort of stuff, and he said this, quite rightly: "We cannot help but come to the conclusion that the moon by rights ought not to be there. The fact that it is one of those strokes of luck almost too good to accept. Small planets such as Earth with weak gravitational fields might well lack satellites. In general, then, when a planet does have satellites, those satellites are much smaller than the planet itself. Therefore, even if the Earth has a satellite, there would be every reason to suspect that at best it would be a tiny world, perhaps 30 miles in diameter. But that is not so. Earth not only has a satellite, but it is a giant satellite, 2,160 miles in diameter. How is it then that that tiny Earth has one? Amazing. Some scientists don't even talk about a planet-satellite relationship, but a planet-planet relationship. The moon's bigger than Pluto.
And think about that. An object bigger than the dwarf planet Pluto orbits the Earth all the time and controls the different tides and aspects and angles of the Earth. This is just absolutely insane.
The best explanation for the moon is observational error. The moon doesn't exist, that scientist said. Another one from NASA.
Possibly my favorite quote ever from NASA.
It seems easier to explain the non-existence of the moon than its existence.
It is easier to explain a moon not being there than it is to explain how the one that we have got there. That is from an official statement from a NASA employee. Now, that is very ear-popping to me. These old wolf ears just perk right up when I hear something like that coming out of an authoritative figure. Mind you, one that we don't tend to listen to very often amongst our considerable circles. However, when they say something like that, you have to stand up and take notice, right?
And then we get the hollow moon. This is what I'm saying, and others have said, is that it's a hollowed out planetoid.
And you remember earlier I told you there was actually more evidence toward it being a hollow structure than it is toward being a solid structure, and here is some of that evidence right now.
In November 1969, the moon was hit by a lunar module to the equivalent of 1 ton of TNT. The shock waves built up, and NASA scientists said the moon rang like a bell. Maurice Ewing, a co-director of the seismic experiment, told the news conference, "As for the meaning of it, I'd rather not make an interpretation right now, but it is as though someone had struck a bell, say in the belfry of a church, a single blow, and found that the reverberation from it continued for 30 minutes. It got a bigger smack eventually, which I'll come to. Frank Press from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, said that for a rather small impact to produce an effect that lasted for 30 minutes was quite beyond the range of our experience."
At the size of the impact that they made, there should have been a very, very small vibration that went into the ground, and that should have been it. It should not have reverberated and literally rang like a bell for 30 minutes. That is just beyond. There's no real explanation to this day as to exactly why that occurred. There's, once again, a lot of theories, but there's never been a proven reason as to why this happens to occur on the moon. Also, it makes you wonder, if you look at the craters on the moon, why they're all exactly the exact same depth. No matter how old they are or how young they are all the exact same depth. But we'll get to that later.
This is a guy called Gordon MacDonald. He said in the early 1960s, it would seem that the moon is more like a hollow than a homogeneous sphere. And this guy from MIT said the lunar orbiter experiments had vastly improved knowledge of the moon's gravitational field and indicated the frightening possibility that the moon might be hollow. Now we'll come to this bigger whack. A launch vehicle struck the moon with the equivalent of 11 tons of TNT, and NASA scientists said the moon reacted like a gong and continued to vibrate for 3 hours and 20 minutes to a depth of up to 25 miles.
So an even bigger impact caused an even bigger and longer reverberation or ringing in space. Now that is just absolutely wild. The only way this makes sense is there has to be a hollowed out core where the sound waves can reverberate back and forth, because they can't reverberate very well through solid object. There has to be an echo chamber of some type for this to happen.
Ken Johnson, a supervisor of the Data and Photo Control Department during the Apollo missions, told Who Built the Moon author Alan Butler that the moon not only rang like a bell, but the whole moon wobbled in such a precise way that it was almost as though it had gigantic hydraulic damper struts inside it.
Because the reverberations would have most likely twisted the moon into such a way that it may have even made it explode, albeit if it was a solid object, if it was that thin. However, the fact that it did not, and the fact that it just wibbled and wobbled like it had hydraulic struts in it, really does make you wonder about what is going on with the moon.
These two Russian scientists from the Soviet Academy of Scientists wrote an article in 1970 in Sputnik magazine in Russia headed, "Is the Moon the Creation of an Alien Intelligence?" And all these years later, it indicates to the fact that they were right. What they point out, and others point out, is the outer surface of the Moon is extremely hard and contains minerals like titanium. Moon rocks have been found to contain processed metals, including brass and mica, and the elements uranium-236 and neptunium-237 that have never been found to occur naturally.
Now, aside from the fact that neither one of those elements have been known to occur naturally, I'm pretty sure processed metal is not a naturally occurring thing. As a matter of fact, to the best of my knowledge, processed is the absolute opposite of natural. That's actually after you've taken a natural substance and made something out of it. That is processing, of course. So how could processed metals be found within moon rocks?
Uranium-236 is a long-lived radioactive nuclear waste and is found in spent nuclear fuel and reprocessed uranium. Neptunium-237 is a radioactive metallic element and a byproduct of nuclear reactors and the production of plutonium.
So this specifically is from the production of plutonium in nuclear reactors. Now, why would that be on the moon? Did they shoot nuclear waste to the moon at some time in the past? Honestly, that would not surprise me with our government at all. Matter of fact, that's probably something I should look into, but that aside, how do these things get on the moon if man had not been there yet? What else or who else was there before man? Or was on it before it even entered our orbit to begin with?
Some lunar rocks have been found to contain 10 times more titanium than titanium-rich rocks on Earth. Titanium is used in supersonic jets, deep-diving submarines, and spacecraft.
Though a naturally occurring metal, yes, titanium is, it is not in the abundance in which it is found on the moon. Which, once again, if the impactor theory was correct, there should be a random slathering across both, with the Earth having more, I would think.
Dr. Harold Urey, the winner of the Nobel Prize for Chemistry, said he was terribly puzzled by the rocks from the moon and in particular their titanium content. He said the samples were mind-blowers and that he could not account for the titanium. The two Russian scientists said in their article, if a material had to be devised to protect a giant artificial satellite from the unfavorable effects of temperature from the cosmic radiation and meteorite bombardment, the experts would probably have hit upon precisely these refractory metals. Refractory metals are incredibly resistant to heat and wear. In that case, is it not clear why lunar rock is such an extraordinarily poor heat conductor, a factor which so amazed the astronauts? Wasn't that what the designers of this super Sputnik of the Earth were after? From the engineer's point of view, this spaceship of ages long past, which we call the Moon, is superbly constructed. They say it's a hollowed-out planetoid, and they say if you're going to launch an artificial Sputnik, then it is advisable to make it hollow. At the same time, it would be naive to imagine that anyone capable of such a tremendous space project would be satisfied simply with some kind of giant empty chunk hurled into a near-Earth trajectory.
And it really does bring into question why one would do that. But it does also make you wonder if it is a hollow object, there's got to be an entrance somewhere on the moon. Some people think they've found it. Some have found craters that they say have no bottom. This is anecdotal, I cannot prove it. However, I have heard while doing this research that there could be certain craters that aren't exactly craters like we think. The ones that are deeper than most all the others, and like I said earlier, most all of the craters are the exact same depth, except a few. And these go on to the point, like I said, that they believe they may have, quote, no bottom. These could very well be the entrances to the hollow earth, or maybe not. That is speculation.
It is more likely that what we have here is a very ancient spaceship, the interior of which was filled with fuel for the engines and materials and appliances for repair work, navigation instruments, observation equipment, and all manner of machinery. In other words, everything necessary to enable this caravel of the universe to serve as a Noah's Ark, appropriate, of intelligence, perhaps even as the home of a whole civilization, envisaging a prolonged thousands of millions of years existence and long wanderings through space, thousands of millions of miles.
It would be very much easier to monitor the human race if you had an object near enough to them that circled them on the perfect axis where it could see pretty much the entire Earth, and in a way such that it could be monitoring all the actions going on, from nuclear to chemical to even our atmosphere itself. So the idea that an alien civilization could be monitoring us for good or bad reasons either way is very, very interesting.
Naturally, the hull of such a spaceship must be super tough in order to stand up to the blows of meteorites and sharp fluctuations between extreme heat and extreme cold. Probably the shell is a double-layered affair. The basis is a dark armoring of about 20 miles in thickness, and outside of it some kind of more loosely packed covering, a thinner layer averaging about 3 miles. In certain areas where the lunar seas and craters are, the upper layer is quite thin, in some cases non-existent. And as this scientist said, the moon is made inside out. In other words, what's on the outside should really be on the inside, and that supports the idea of a hollowed-out planetoid. So, when I started to put this together, and there's a lot more of this in the new book, I then called the oracle in South Africa, Crater Mutwa, and I found Zulu legends to be incredibly accurate with their symbolism.
And as we all know, any type of ancient legends really, really intrigue me, and I love to present those to you guys.
And this is the thing, symbolism. You get these anthropologists and people, they go around and they look at these shamans and these ancient stories, and they take the blooming things literally. Now, like I said earlier, we now have the tools which make it easier for us, because technology is mirroring reality, therefore we have the analogies. When these ancient stories were put together, they didn't have that. They had to try to get their point across in simple ways that people of that time could relate to. So they used symbolism. So when I read around Crater Mutwa, I didn't tell him anything that I'd put together or come across or thought. I just said to him, can you tell me any Zulu legends about the moon? And he said, yes, we consider the moon to be an egg. Now, when you take that literally, you say the moon's an egg, the anthropologists, the primitive people you know.
Which is a point that I drive home so often, that scientists are just so close-minded and want to take it all literally and don't have the time to look into an esoteric explanation for some of this stuff.
But no, they symbolize it as an egg for a reason. And this is what he said. The legends, the Zulu legends, say that the moon was brought here hundreds of generations ago by two brothers, Wawani and Umpanku, who were the leaders of the Chitahuri. They were known as the Water Brothers and had, quote, scaly skin like a fish. Now, this story relates almost exactly to the stories found on ancient clay tablets in what is now Iraq, Sumerian accounts of the Anunnaki, a non-human race, I would say reptilian race, that came to the earth in the same way that other parts of the world, in the ancient world, talk about. And the Anunnaki, according to these accounts, were led by two brothers called Enki and Enlil. And at least one of them, Enki, was symbolized under another name too as in relation to water, exactly the same as this. Zulu legends tell of how Wawani and Umpanku stole the moon in the form of an egg, and this is why they symbolize an egg, not because they're primitive, from the great fire dragon and emptied out the yolk until it was hollow. They then rolled the moon across the sky to the earth and caused cataclysmic events on this planet. Zulu legends also say that the Chitauri threatened to move the moon if humans didn't do what they said because of the devastation that would cause.
Now, isn't that an intriguing piece of information? Let's think about this for a second. They're supposed to be primitive people who come up with this story of a dragon's egg to explain the moon. Of course, it can't be true. It's just, Zulu legend. That's just primitive peoples. However, these primitive peoples also knew the circumstances that would occur if the moon was not around the Earth. Now, how would they have such important and very high tech, high knowledge, high information about how the moon works and about its relationship to the Earth? How would they know any of this if they were just this primitive people who explain the moon by being an egg? However, they can tell you that by the Earth or the moon not being there, the Earth would have catastrophic problems. Now, can somebody explain to me how those two things make sense together? This is the kind of craziness that these dogmatic scientists try to shove down your throat and hope like heck that you don't question it. And how dare you if you do, which is why we like to hear. And, it really just bothers me when you have some kind of culture or ancient writings that they say, oh no, it's just myth, it's just legend, it's just people that weren't smart enough to understand science, yet understand the science of the moon not being there and the problems it would cause on the Earth. That just makes very little sense as far as making sense to me. That sounds like somebody who's just talking off the top of their head. What do you guys think?
What the two scientists said about this 2-3 mile outer kind of protection, followed by a 20-mile impregnable layer, explains one of the anomalies of the moon, which the craters are pretty much of universal depth. Even though the scale of the impact and the size of the crater can be massively different, the depth is about the same, really, within a very short ratio. And that's, the scientists say, because it goes into the outer layer, the kind of buffer, but it can't go further than this inner protection layer that is impregnable.
And as we heard earlier, the Apollo astronauts actually had a issue digging through the soil or the crust of the moon. They could not do it. With the equipment they had, they were unable to crack the surface of the moon. So what he's saying here actually makes quite a bit of sense.
This guy, Don Wilson, wrote a book in the 70s called Our Mysterious Spaceship Moon. And these are some of the anomalies that he lists, and there are others that can be explained by what we're talking about. Why the moon is a freak world, too big and too far out to be a natural satellite of Earth. Why the moon has such shallow craters. Why some moon rocks are older than Earth and as old, at least, as the solar system. Why the moon seems inside out. Why the moon vibrates like a huge gong, transmitting tremors great distances around and through itself. How the moon can produce so many contradictions of data and findings.
All of these very excellent questions about our moon, but there are those, of course, that believe that the moon landing was faked and we never made it there at all. Still to this day, haven't ever actually made it to the moon. And I respect those that believe that, and there is a lot of evidence on both sides of that argument. Personally, I have a very unpopular opinion amongst most people. I actually believe that we did go to the moon, but that is just my belief. Remember, that is my opinion. That doesn't make it true or false. That makes it just that, my opinion. And you are more than welcome to disagree. I'm sure many of you will, and that's quite okay. Because there are those that not only disagree that we went to the moon, but there are those that disagree that we could even go to an object such as the moon, because in their eyes, the moon doesn't actually exist as a solid object to begin with.
The moon, Earth's only natural satellite. It orbits the planet approximately every 27 days, at a distance of 380,000 kilometers away. It is thought to have originated around 4.5 billion years ago, formed from the debris produced in a collision between the Earth and an object the size of Mars. In total, 12 people have walked on the moon in various missions between 1969 and 1972.
At least that is the claim.
But there is a widespread popular conspiracy theory that the US staged these expeditions in a film studio, and mankind has never actually been to the moon. However, some theorists go one step further, presenting the notion that not only the moon landings were faked, but the moon itself is fake too. Instead, they argue, it is a hologram projected by a conspiring government alliance.
Well, we definitely could not have gone to the moon if it was a hologram.
But could there possibly be any truth in this? Is there any chance that the moon as we know it doesn't even exist?
And if you remember the quotes earlier, one of them actually stated the moon is not really there, it is just a fallacy of vision, so that is interesting. Could this be evidence that the moon is a hologram? Could all the anomalies and oddities be that very evidence that it's not real?
In 2013, YouTube user Crow777 began posting a series of videos, which he claims show proof that the moon is not what it seems.
And if you remember this phenomenon called the lunar wave, it actually made shockwaves for quite a while through all of the paranormal and conspiracy communities trying to explain what had been captured on film.
After over a year of observation, Crow filmed what he called lunar waves, which look like ripples passing across the surface of the moon. According to Crow, these waves demonstrate that the moon is a hologram. He says that the ripples are actually power glitches in an artificial electrical system.
And to me, I would more liken this to like the refresh or flicker rate of a television or a computer monitor, where it's constantly refreshing the image over and over. So could that be what's going on the moon? Could that be a refreshed image constantly from a holographic projector somewhere?
He further asserts that he has been contacted by 3 individuals who are supposedly privy to classified information and were able to confirm his suspicions. And Crow777 is not alone in his beliefs. Prominent conspiracy theorist and outspoken broadcaster David Icke argues that humanity should not be tricked into believing the moon exists just because figures of authority have said that it does. Icke strongly advocates the idea that the moon is not a natural body, stating on his website that it is instead a control system, manipulating our sense of reality to make us the slave race of those who are doing it. Dave Johnson, another YouTuber, claims to have discovered and filmed an unlisted satellite that constitutes the heart of this conspiracy. He believes that satellites such as this make up an international network of projection points from which the hologram is transmitted. However, a significant problem with the fake moon theory is that documents and images referring to the moon predate the development of holography in the 1940s.
And personally, that is one of my biggest arguments against the holographic moon idea, is the fact that the holographic technology didn't exist until quite recent times. So unless it was some type of alien hologram or holograph technology, I sincerely doubt that that is the case. But again, that is only my opinion.
Theorists argue that these sources could have been falsified, misinterpreted, or retrospectively altered by perpetrators, and the moon never really existed before the 20th century. Alternatively, an adapted version of the theory says the moon previously did exist, but has now been replaced or hidden by the more recent creation of a holographic version.
Now, that one I can't argue with as much. If there's a current hologram covering what we know as the moon, it would explain a lot of the oddities as far as what we see, especially recently with the Mandela effect and the different changes that we've seen on the moon, at least within that community that we have documented.
David Icke offers a variety of explanations for the purpose of this elaborate hoax. He suggests that the hologram could be part of global Illuminati interference. By tricking the entire world into believing in a moon that doesn't really exist, the secret society of elites would demonstrate its ultimate control over the spread of knowledge.
So what is the moon? Is it a hologram? Is it a projection on a dome over the flat earth? Is it a real solid object made of cheese? Just kidding. Is it actually a hollowed out object? Or is it a spaceship here to monitor us? There's a lot of things that it could be, and there's a lot of anomalies that surround the moon. Is there spaceships on the moon? Is there buildings on the moon? There's so many questions to be asked. There's actually also helium-3 is an element that has supposedly been found on the moon, and that will help us do nuclear fission opposed to nuclear fusion that we do right now, or maybe we do fusion and fission. Either way, it'll allow us to do the opposite of what we do right now, which would be a cleaner energy source, and there's a heavy abundance of this on the moon. So there is talk of going to mine the moon at one point and turn it into a great big mining facility, but if they can't even tap the mantle, we'll see how well that goes. But what do you guys think? Do you think it is a real solid object? Do you think the moon is an egg? Do you think it is a spaceship? Or do you think it's just a regular old rock that may have been formed when the Earth was formed, and the mainstream ideas and narrative is completely true? I know one thing. In the end, ladies and gentlemen, you be the judge. We got to close it out. That's right. That's it for this episode of the Dark Wolf's Den Show for Wednesday, September 23rd, 2020. I hope you guys enjoyed our look at Moon Madness. But don't you worry, coming up, we have a wonderful weekend of topics, guys. The den may be closing, but the weekend fun is only just begun, because we've got another surprise in the schedule this week, guys. That's right, I'm going to be taking the airwaves again tomorrow night with Mars Madness. That's right, instead of Moon Mad, about Mars Madness. And then AJ, our buddy AJ the Ripon Rabbit, will be back Friday through Sunday for the Ripon Rabbit Hole live show, and I happen to know what he's going to be talking about on those 3 days. Friday night, he's going to be talking about unmasked. We all wear masks during our life. Do we sometimes forget to take them off? Or sometimes are we forced to keep them on, if you know what I mean? Then on Saturday night, he's going to talk about procrastination. Are you a procrastinator? Is this something that is a problem for you, or is this something that you enjoy? If it is a problem, perhaps he'll give us some tips and tricks to avoid being a procrastinator in the future. Then on Sunday, one of my favorite topics, guys. Everybody knows I love the quantum physics, and of course, string theory is a big part of quantum physics. Sunday, AJ the Ripon Rabbit's going to try to get caught up in the strings of string theory. You know how them rabbits love to play with string, right? I didn't know it, but apparently so, you know? Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, that's the lineup for this weekend here on Ripon Common Sense Radio. We really look forward to having each one of you guys here each night this weekend. Amazing topics, incredible lineup, and I'm proud to have the airwaves both tonight and tomorrow. So, you guys, we've got a treat coming up this weekend for sure. Speaking of treats, one of my favorite treats is going over to the RiponRabbitHole.com. That's right, the RiponRabbitHole.com. Over there, you're going to find the 24/7 Backstage Lounge, which is actually where I'm about to head here in just a couple minutes. Go on, click the 24/7 Backstage Lounge link, scroll about halfway down the page, and find the VIP, and that is where you'll find me, guys. It's completely free. That's right. Now we're done right from you, especially when it's a challenge topic. Those are really, really exciting ones. Also, guys, AJ the Ripon Rabbit has a group over there for show suggestions and topics, as well as Juanito 1975's Lucid Dreaming group, and I hear there's a couple other really amazing groups over there. So no matter what you're into, you'll find it over there in the RiponRabbitHole.com. Guys, that's it for me. My name's Jerry Hicks, also known as the Dark Wolf, and on behalf of everyone who's helped us put this show together, and on behalf of AJ the Ripon Rabbit and everybody at Ripon Common Sense Radio, ladies and gentlemen, we thank you for being here, and we wish you a good night. And until tomorrow night, ladies and gentlemen, stay awake, but dare to dream. How yeah!
yeah, the weekend has officially begun. My top hats off to you, Jerry Hicks and the Dark Wolf's Den Show, for starting it off right. My goodness, I can tell you, it has been an adventure this week for Nikki Rabbit and I. I'll be back again Friday night. I will not appear tomorrow night, Thursday, where Jerry Hicks, the Dark Wolf's Den, is going to continue with part 2 of Moon Madness with what he calls Mars Madness. So join him for part 2 again tomorrow night, starting at 7 p.m. Pacific, 9 Central. I'll be back again then Friday night with a special look at Unmasked. With this road trip, Nikki Rabbit and I, we did over 1,600 miles so far. From Southern California to Northern California, we've met and discussed this topic of masks with people all up and down the coast. We're going to give you a full report of exactly what we uncovered or what we unmasked. And it's time. It's time that we start to talk about this, because you know what? If we don't talk about taking masks off, we're going to have masks on for the rest of our life. And I don't think that's what any of us want. Put a 1 in the chat room if you agree. It's time to talk about how do we remove these masks. Then Saturday night, we're going to talk about a subject that I know all too well, procrastination. Perhaps you do too. Why do today what you can put off until tomorrow? That's going to be Saturday night, a look at procrastination. The rabbit hole goes deep, starting at 7 p.m. Pacific, 9 Central. Then Sunday night, we'll end out the weekend right with a look at string theory. Now, I can tell you, from quantum physics to theories and realities, string theory is going to blow your mind. It's going to be an incredible weekend of content. And again, Jerry Hicks doing a doubleheader. Be back again tomorrow night, Thursday night, with Mars Madness, starting at 7 p.m. Pacific, 9 Central. I wish I could join you all in the Backstage VIP Lounge, but unfortunately, currently we're in Thousand Oaks, California. And perhaps we will, carry the conversation with you back there. We might sneak in if our internet allows us to. But nevertheless, you can take part in the conversation at riponrabbithole.com. So, thanks for spending a Thursday, a Wednesday. What am I thinking? Thanks for spending a Wednesday night together with us. Keep tuned right here to the very best of Common Sense Radio, Ripon Rabbit Hole. Until we meet again, I'm AJ, the Ripon Rabbit. Take care of yourselves and each other. Good night.
I'm lost and into the dark. Some things are better left unknown. And I'll never find you here, 'cause no one's ever What a widow, a peaceful spider. When the glass is clean, she's a sneaky hider. Hide the light.